Welcome to the deep dive. We're going all the way back to the beginning today.
Oh, wow.
To the beginning,
Yeah.
exploring the first two chapters of Genesis.
The creation story.
Yeah, you probably know the basic outlines,
Sure.
but we're going to uncover some fascinating details, I think.
I think so too.
And think about the deeper implications of this foundational text.
I think it's really interesting how Genesis can feel so ancient
Right.
and far removed from our modern lives,
Right.
but it still has this power to spark conversations about who we are and where we come from and what our place is in the world.
Absolutely. So let's dive into chapter 1,
Okay.
where the whole universe unfolds before our eyes.
It's beautiful.
It's incredible. We see this progression.
Right.
Light emerges from the darkness.
Uh-huh.
Sky separates from water.
Yeah.
Land appears, and then this explosion of life. Plants, sun, moon, stars, fish, birds, animals.
It's like
It's like-
cosmic symphony.
Yeah, cosmic symphony.
Being conducted, with each element added at just the right moment.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
It is.
And it's not just about what of creation,
Right.
but how that repeated phrase, God saw that it was good, it's like
Oh, yeah.
this refrain,
Mm-hmm.
this affirmation of the inherent goodness and beauty of each element,
Yes.
culminating in the creation of humankind.
Yes. Culminating in humankind.
And speaking of humankind,
Yeah.
when humans arrive on the scene,
Right.
they're given dominion over all other living creatures.
That's an interesting word.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
A word that's been interpreted in many ways.
Yes. Many ways.
Some see it as a license for exploitation,
Right.
justifying human dominance over nature.
Yes. But I think if we look at the Hebrew term and its context, there's a strong argument for understanding dominion as responsible stewardship,
I like that.
as being entrusted with the care and protection of creation. What do you think about that? I think it's a very powerful idea,
Yeah.
especially in today's world where we're facing so many environmental challenges. Yes.
Absolutely.
It suggests that we're not just here to take from the earth, but to nurture and preserve it.
Exactly. And then after all that activity
Right.
of creation, there's that incredibly significant moment, the seventh day,
Right.
the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
God doesn't just keep going. He rests.
Yeah, God rests. What a concept.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's almost like a blueprint for us.
It is.
It's this reminder to step back from our constant striving
Yes.
and make space for rest and reflection.
Our Oasis culture could really use that.
I think so too.
A little bit of Sabbath.
Yeah, even in this creation story, there's a rhythm of work and rest built in.
That's right. A rhythm.
And then chapter 2 takes a bit of a different approach.
Okay.
We zoom in,
Uh-huh.
leaving the vastness of the cosmos
Right.
and focusing specifically on humans and their early experiences in the Garden of Eden.
It's almost like we're getting a close-up after seeing that wide shot.
I like that.
We're introduced to Adam,
Right.
formed from the dust of the ground,
Yeah.
with God breathing life directly into him. It's such powerful imagery,
It is.
that breath of life.
Yeah.
It's so fundamental to our understanding of what it means to be human,
Yeah, to be alive.
to be alive. And then we have this incredible setting, the Garden of Eden.
A lush, vibrant paradise.
Yeah, overflowing with beauty and abundance.
But amidst all that bounty,
Right.
there's a shadow, a hint of tension.
Uh-oh.
Genesis mentions 4 rivers flowing out of Eden,
Okay.
connecting it to the wider world, but also hinting at this possibility of leaving this paradise.
Interesting.
And then there are those 2 very specific trees,
Uh-huh.
the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
What is it about those trees?
They're so fascinating.
Yeah.
We're told that the fruit of both trees is good for food,
Right.
but only one is forbidden.
Yeah.
God commands Adam not to eat from the tree of knowledge, warning that doing so will result in death.
So it's not just about a piece of fruit then.
Right.
It's about a choice.
Yes.
A boundary being set.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It introduces this profound idea about free will. Humans are given the capacity to choose.
To obey or disobey.
Yes, and with that choice
Yeah.
comes the potential for consequences,
Even in this idyllic setting.
even in this idyllic setting.
And then we have the creation of Eve.
Right.
God recognizing that it is not good for the man to be alone.
Yeah.
Creates Eve from Adam's rib to be his companion and helper.
Now, that word helper,
Okay.
it doesn't imply subordination,
Okay.
but rather an equal partnership.
I see.
Think about Adam's reaction when he sees Eve.
Yeah.
He says, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh."
Mhm.
It's such a powerful expression of recognition of seeing oneself reflected in another.
There's this profound sense of connection,
Right.
of two becoming one.
Right.
But they're given this immense responsibility, this power of choice together.
And that's where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because this idea of choice of free will is going to have profound implications for the rest of the story.
It really is the turning point.
Yeah,
The hinge upon which everything else swings.
I agree.
Before we move on to the consequences of that choice,
Okay.
I want to pause here for a moment
Sure.
and ask you to consider this.
Yeah.
In these 2 chapters, we've seen a universe unfold, life emerge in all its diversity, and humans placed in this position of responsibility within creation.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But it's just the beginning.
That's right. It's just the beginning.
Stay with us as we dive deeper into the story, exploring the ramifications of that fateful choice in the garden.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We left off with this idea of choice hanging in the air.
Right.
Adam and Eve standing in paradise, given this one instruction, and yet
Yeah.
we all know what's coming, right?
We do.
The temptation, the disobedience, and
Yeah.
ultimately the fall.
It's fascinating how this story, even though we may know it well,
Right.
it still manages to, grab our attention, that
Yeah.
moment of choice.
Yeah.
It speaks to something so deeply human.
That tension between what we know we should do and what we desire.
Absolutely.
So,
Chapter 3 introduces this new character,
okay.
the serpent, often interpreted as a symbol of temptation or deception.
Right.
The serpent approaches Eve with this question.
Okay.
Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?
Oh, it's subtle.
It's
Very subtle.
almost sowing a seed of doubt.
Yeah.
But Eve doesn't just ignore the serpent.
Right.
She engages in this dialogue,
Yeah.
correcting the serpent
Uh-huh.
and stating God's command.
Right.
But then
Okay.
the serpent goes further, saying, you will not certainly die.
Oh, wow.
And it's here where things take a turn.
Yeah, things get interesting.
The serpent is challenging God's word directly,
Uh-huh.
claiming that God is withholding knowledge from them.
Right.
For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.
It's a powerful appeal. Your curiosity, our
Yeah.
desire for knowledge and power.
And notice how Eve responds. She sees that the fruit is good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom.
So she's weighing these different aspects.
Yeah.
The sensory appeal, the intellectual promise against God's command.
And ultimately, she makes the choice to disobey, taking a bite of the fruit and sharing it with Adam.
The moment that has kind of echoed throughout history,
It really has.
often framed as like the fall of man.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is like the complexity of their decision making.
Right. It wasn't just a simple act of rebellion.
It wasn't, there's a sense of curiosity,
Yeah.
maybe even a naive ambition,
Uh-huh.
this desire to be like God knowing good and evil.
And then the consequences are immediate.
Right.
Their eyes are opened,
Yeah.
but not in the way that they expected.
Not in the way they expected.
They become aware of their nakedness,
Right.
and they feel shame.
Shame for the first time.
And the first time, it's like a veil has been lifted.
It has.
A veil of innocence.
Yeah.
And they see themselves and the world in a new light.
And the paradise they once inhabited is no longer the same.
Right. And this is just the beginning of the consequences.
Oh, yeah.
They hear God walking in the garden,
Uh-huh.
and they hide,
All right.
afraid.
Of course.
When God confronts them,
Yeah.
Adam blames Eve.
And Eve blames the serpent.
It's like this instinct to deflect, to avoid responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever notice that in yourself?
Oh, absolutely.
When faced with a mistake,
Yeah.
how easy is it to point the finger?
It's a very human response.
It really is.
It is.
And the consequences of their actions extend outward,
Right.
affecting not just their relationship with God,
Right.
but their relationship with each other
Yeah.
and with the natural world.
Pain in childbirth for women, toil in the fields for men,
Right.
and ultimately expulsion from the garden.
Paradise lost.
Paradise lost.
And humanity is thrust into this world where survival is a struggle,
Right.
where the consequences of their choices are felt every day.
Such a stark contrast
It is.
from the abundance and ease of Eden to this world of thorns and thistles.
But even in this moment of judgment, there's a glimmer of hope.
There is.
God promises that a descendant of Eve will one day crush the serpent's head, hinting at a future redemption, a victory over evil.
Right. And this promise, as we know,
Yeah.
will continue to unfold throughout the rest of the biblical narrative.
It does. But for now,
Yeah.
we're left with Adam and Eve exiled from Eden,
Right.
facing the challenges of a world outside of paradise.
Right. A fallen world.
And the story doesn't shy away from the darkness that enters this new reality.
It doesn't.
We see the first murder,
We do.
as Cain, driven by jealousy, kills his brother Abel.
It's like a tragic escalation of the consequences of sin.
Yeah.
A stark reminder of the brokenness that has now entered the world.
It sets a pattern for the stories that follow.
It does.
We see humanity struggling with temptation, with violence, with corruption.
Yeah, it's as though the consequences of that initial choice
Yep.
are rippling outward,
Yeah.
impacting generation after generation.
But even amidst this darkness,
Yes.
we see moments of grace,
Yeah.
of God's faithfulness shining through.
We do.
The story of Noah, for instance,
Yeah.
often seen as a story of both judgment
Right.
and mercy.
The world, as it's described, is filled with wickedness, and God decides to send a flood
Right.
to wipe the slate clean.
Just start over.
But in choosing Noah, a man who found favor in the eyes of the Lord,
Right.
God preserves a remnant of humanity,
Yeah.
a seed of hope for a new beginning.
It's a powerful image.
It is.
This ark carrying not just Noah and his family,
All right.
but representatives of every living creature riding out this storm
Oh.
and eventually finding dry land.
Yeah, it speaks to this idea that even when things seem hopeless,
Right.
even when the world is overwhelmed by darkness,
Mm-hmm.
there's this possibility for renewal,
Yeah.
for a fresh start.
A new beginning.
It's an idea that resonates across cultures and throughout history.
I think so.
This belief in the possibility of starting over, of finding a new path forward.
It's a message I think we need today
Absolutely.
in a world facing so many challenges.
I agree.
And speaking of new beginnings,
Okay.
that's exactly what we see at the end of Genesis
Yeah.
with the call of Abraham
Mm-hmm.
and the promise of a new covenant.
It's a turning point in the narrative.
Yeah.
Where God chooses Abraham and his descendants to be a blessing to all nations.
It's the foundation for the story of Israel,
It is.
and it sets the stage for the unfolding drama
Yes.
of God's relationship with humanity,
Yeah.
a story that will continue to unfold in the chapters to come.
So we've journeyed from the creation of the world
We ask.
to the fall of humanity,
Yes.
from the expulsion from Eden
Right.
to the flood and the promise of a new covenant.
It's been quite a journey.
It has been a whirlwind.
Yeah. But before we move on,
Okay.
I'd like to hear your thoughts. What stands out to you in this part of the story?
What resonates with your own experiences and understanding of the world?
We'll be right back after a short break to continue our exploration of Genesis. Welcome back. You know, after that last section, I'm really struck by the sheer scope of these stories.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, we covered the creation of everything, humanity's rise and fall,
Yeah.
and hints at a new beginning, all in just 2 chapters.
It's remarkable how much is packed in
Oh.
to these opening verses.
It's like a blueprint for understanding the entire human experience.
I like that, a blueprint.
So let's try to tie a few of these threads together
Okay.
as we wrap up.
Sounds good.
We talked about that key concept of dominion earlier.
Uh-huh.
The idea that humans are called to be caretakers of creation.
Right, not just rulers over it.
Not just rulers. And I
Yeah.
think that idea connects to the Garden of Eden imagery.
I think so too.
It wasn't just a place of perfect beauty. It
Right.
was also a garden.
Right, a place meant to be cultivated and nurtured.
So even in paradise,
Yeah.
there was work to be done.
Right, not necessarily the toil that comes as a consequence of disobedience, but a sense of partnership with creation.
Partnership, yeah.
Yeah.
And perhaps that sheds some light on why the consequence of disobedience isn't just death,
Right.
but knowing good and evil.
Yeah, before there was only the goodness of Eden.
Mhm.
Afterward, there's choice, but with that choice comes the burden of discerning right from wrong.
And that burden doesn't just fall on individuals, does it?
No, it doesn't.
We see that ripple effect
Right.
through Cain and Abel,
Yeah.
the spread of wickedness that leads to the flood.
Right, it's like that initial choice fractures the whole system.
It really does,
Oh.
which makes that flood narrative even more powerful.
It does.
It's a reminder that even when things seem so broken,
Yeah.
there's always a possibility for renewal.
Like Aries.
Not a return to the same Eden,
Right,
but a new beginning,
right. A second chance.
a second chance. And that second chance in this case is tied to a covenant, to a promise.
That's right.
God chooses Noah and later Abraham not because they're perfect,
Right.
but because of their faith, their willingness to trust, even when things look bleak.
Which brings us back to the very beginning.
Oh, wow.
Remember that recurring phrase in chapter 1?
Yeah.
God saw that it was good.
Yeah.
Despite the flaws of humanity, there's this persistent belief in the inherent goodness of creation.
It's almost like an underlying current of hope
Yes,
running through the entire story.
it is.
Even in the midst of judgment,
Right.
there's grace. Even after exile,
Hmm.
there's a promise.
I think that is the most enduring takeaway from these chapters.
What is it?
It's not just a story about origins.
Right.
It's a story about possibility.
Possibility.
The possibility of redemption, of second chances, of a future that's still being written.
Wow, what a thought to end on.
It is.
So as you go about your day, consider this.
Okay.
How do these themes, creation, choice, consequence, renewal,
Yeah.
how do they show up in your own life?
Where do you see those echoes of Eden, those glimpses of grace?
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, keep diving deep.